Oi, gente! O vídeo de hoje é uma entrevista com Rob Hopkins, fundador do movimento Cidades em Transição, Transitional Towns.
O Rob também é autor de alguns livros e um deles é praticamente um guia para quem está querendo mudança na sua cidade ou no seu bairro. O nome desse livro é Manual para a Transição, da dependência do petróleo para a resiliência local. Vamos ver o que o Rob vai falar com a gente.
So transition is a movement of communities now in 50 countries who are reimagining and rebuilding the world. So it has those two strands to it, that we need to create in a world that doesn't really value imagination and where the future looks very complicated and frightening, that we need to make spaces to come together with other people to imagine the kind of world we'd like to see, and then we go off and then we do it. So if you visit a transition town, you will hear stories of lots of different projects that are going on and things that are actually happening, but all in the context of trying to create a new story about the future. So I guess since the beginning, some of the frames that have underpinned transition are one which is around imagination and that need to open up and create those spaces where the imagination can flourish. I think there is an important aspect of saying, yes, there's lots of very bad news around, but if we just focus on the bad news, then we get paralyzed and our imaginations contract and we become less of service to these times. So there's a big strand that runs through transition, which is about possibility, positivity, a kind of engaged optimism, like a focused, applied form of optimism. There is a sense that we can't do this on our own, we have to work with other people. There is a strand which says that we need to create new economies in the place that we live, so we need to create new, resilient, place-based economies where we become our own building developers, we become our own food system, we become our own energy companies, and we see that happening in different ways in every place. The big problems are more skillfully tackled at the local scale. Sustainability is a term that has become really almost meaningless, having been kind of co-opted by governments and corporations. And you know, the Coca-Cola, if it puts its plastic in a bottle with 70% recycled plastic, it becomes a sustainable company. No, it really doesn't. And but the concept of sustainability has always been that, you know, the developed West is up here and it needs to come to a place where it meets the global South coming the other way, so we reach a place where everybody can live kind of sustainably, you know, which is fantastic and which has designed into it that idea of social justice and so on. But what it misses is that sense that what we're seeing through climate change, through economic unraveling, through energy issues, is that actually there will be a lot of shock in that pathway. It's not going to be a smooth, gradual pathway, and that we have to design for shock. So in a town like Totnes here, for example, you know, our supermarket contained 3-4 days worth of food, and if the lorries stop coming, we have no food because the local agriculture that used to feed the town largely sends its food off to other places. So that idea that you could make Totnes more resilient in terms of food by rebuilding its food system, conventionally in the kind of resilience thinking they talk about, it's how you encounter a shock and then get back to where you were before. We say actually it's about acting in advance of the shock to design a new way of doing things, which is then more resilient. So I work with Transition Network, which is a charity that we set up to support and inspire and nurture and train this kind of rapidly evolving network of people doing transition. And from the very beginning, we were really inspired by systems thinking because what we were seeing was a self-organizing network. So transition has never worked like a Coca-Cola franchise. You know, it's always worked like people hearing about it, oh, let's do that, and evolving in that way. So when we created Transition Network as an organization, our mental picture at the beginning was that the Transition Network would work like the membrane of a cell that would allow the movement to evolve, and our role was really to offer that support, that identity, that kind of reflection of the DNA, I suppose, of the movement in that way, but that would allow the maximum kind of autonomy. And now Transition Network is an organization where we have 40 countries that have what we call national hubs, so Transition Brazil, Transition Italy, Transition Germany, whatever, and they really Transition Network is set up as an organisation that skillfully gives away any power it has to those hub organisations in a way that is very much designed around the whole principles of self-organisation and systems thinking. And at the local scale as well, it's very much recognises that if we're going to make this stuff work, it works based on networks, and it runs. I often think of transition, some people think of like change models as being first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and you work your way through the list. And I think that transition is like a mycorrhizal fungus that you find in a forest, and that it runs, and sometimes it fruits in places you expect, and sometimes it fruits in places you don't expect. And for me, the act of doing transition is like you are introducing transition into the culture. You are inoculating the culture. And then there's a lot of trust about where it will go and where it won't go. If you're a control freak, doing transition is really terrifying, I imagine. So if you're in Brazil and you're watching this and you think, transition sounds interesting, I'd like to start transition where I am, the best place to start is to look at the Transition Brazil, have a website. There are many transition groups across Brazil, and some incredible people, transition trainers, people who can support you and tell you stories of what's happening in Brazil and give you some advice and so on. So if there's already a transition group happening where you are, then get involved. If not, have a look at the Transition Brazil website. There's some really great resources there. There's a fantastic training that you can do. And the most important thing is to share the stories of what you do. If you start a project and it doesn't work, that's absolutely fine too. The most important thing is that we share what we learn, we share our stories. And we always say in transition, if I try and do this on my own, it'll be too little. And if we wait for the government to do it, it'll be too late. But if we get the people around us together and we try and do this together, it might just be enough, and it might just be in time.